All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Always exciting to be able to do these events with MOSAIC Arctic in partnership with Reach the World. Obviously, we're living in a little bit of a different world right now, where normally we'd be broadcasting live into classrooms and students would be firing away with questions. So instead, we're now able to broadcast live into homes. So students, educators, and parents can tune in live or check out the events afterwards. So it's still great to be able to do these connections and still have people learning together. All right, well, we're really excited to have Radiance Commer joining us today. She's a postdoc at the University of Colorado in Boulder. She will, her job with MOSAIC will be working with the unmanned aerial systems, or the UAS, or drones, for atmospheric measurements during the project. She started her graduate education in France with a master's degree in civil engineering from a college of engineering in Toulouse. And before coming to Colorado, she worked on tropical cyclones and ocean wave atmosphere interactions with those unmanned aerial systems in the Indian Ocean. So today she's going to share a little bit about her work, and then hopefully sometime in the next few months, we'll be heading on board the Polarstern to fly those unmanned aerial systems over the Arctic sea ice, because there is a lot that we can learn. So Radiance, it's so great to have you joining us live today. We're excited to get to know you a little bit better, learn a little bit more about UASs, because I bet there's a lot of students who aren't sure what they are, and then we'll have a little Q&A time.
Thank you, Joe. That's very nice to welcome me here. And I'm so happy to share my work and share the MOSAIC project with you today. So, okay.
All right, I can see the screen share starting, and there we go.
Okay. So I'm Radiance Commer. I'm French. I'm currently working at the University of Colorado, and I'm part of the MOSAIC project, which stands for Multidisciplinary Drifting Observatory for the Study of the Arctic Climate. So as Joe said, I haven't been in the Arctic yet, but I'm already working on the project, and I built up some experience with drones, or what we call unmanned aerial systems. And I would like to share some of these experiences with you today. So just a few words about my educational background. So I studied in France in a college of engineering in civil engineering. So it's about like structures, bridges, roads. So nothing to do with climate, but I wanted to work in humanitarian ed, and that was my initial project. Then I went to South Korea for a research master, so still in civil engineering. But then when I came back to France, I met an amazing researcher working in atmospheric science with drones. So that's how I started my PhD. And since then, I learned a lot about our climate and built up some experience with drones. So during my PhD, I had the opportunity to go to UC San Diego in California, thanks to a Fulbright scholarship. So that was my first experience in US, and that was really interesting. After my PhD, I worked in the Indian Ocean in La Réunion Island on tropical cyclones. And then I finally came to Boulder in the University of Colorado to work on the MOSAIC project. And this has been my dream, to work on the Arctic for a long time. I just didn't have the opportunity before, so I'm so excited to be part of this project and hopefully to go in the Arctic. So I spoke about atmospheric science, but before, I just want to be clear about what we call the processes that we study in the atmosphere. So as you can see, there are so many processes going on, and all these interactions are going to define our climate over several years. So we are interested to look at the clouds, look at the wind or the solar radiation to have a kind of a picture of our atmosphere and to gather more information that would help us to understand our climate. So all the studies that I'm going to introduce with UIV are designed to better understand our climate, but we are going to focus on different things depending on the project. So for example, for MOSAIC, we are working on the air-ice interaction and the air-ocean interactions. And to study these interactions, we measure the temperature, pressure, relative humidity, the wind, and sunlight. All these parameters are measured with the drones. So when I say drone, that might be the first picture that you have in mind. When I add a drone like an airplane, you might think about this kind of drone. But in atmospheric science, we rather use fixed-wing unmanned aerial systems, so they're much smaller and that they have this kind of shape. To measure the parameters that I mentioned, like temperature, pressure, wind, there are so many different ways to do it. Could be instruments on a tower, could be instruments on board of a ship, could be even like satellite measurements. And traditionally, these instruments have been on board of unmanned aircraft, but in the past 15 years, the miniaturization of the instruments allow us to put them in the drones and to develop this kind of platform. So compared to unmanned aircraft, drones are easier and cheaper to operate. They can also access areas that are dangerous for the unmanned aircraft. And they also provide what we call a higher resolution because they fly slower. So the drones that I usually use for atmospheric science are like between 1 and 5 kilograms and can fly up to 1 or 2 hours. So the sensors on board could be commercially available, or we have to design our own sensors because they don't exist. So for example, that was the topic for my PhD, to design a probe to measure the wind with a fixed wing drone like this one. So I'm going to speak about different field campaigns I took part with drones. So you will see pictures and videos from tests in France, and then from Cyprus and Ireland to study clouds, and then from La Réunion Island to study cyclones, and Barbados to study clouds again. And then, of course, I will speak about the MOSAIC project in the Arctic. So first, Cyprus. So why are we interested in studying clouds to understand climate in Cyprus? Because Cyprus is considered as a very polluted environment, because there's pollution from the Middle East, pollution from Europe, but there are also natural particles that are going to influence the clouds, like sea salt or dust from the Sahara Desert. So it's a very interesting environment to get a picture of what we call the polluted environment. So that's the team for the UAV flights in the clouds. So during the flights, there's 2 pilots. There's the RC pilot who takes care of the takeoff and landing. And there's what we call the ground station pilot, because there is an automatic part of the flight that sometimes the drone is very far away or even in clouds, so we don't visually see it. So we really need to keep the link with the drone to make sure that there is no problems on board, that all the instruments are working. So that's why we have all the information going down on the ground station, and we can still control the drone and update the flight pattern if we need to. So that was Cyprus. And then the campaign in Ireland was very complementary to the Cyprus campaign because we were also studying clouds, but in an environment with very little influence of the human activity. So it was mainly like sea salt coming from the Atlantic Ocean. So what we call a very pristine marine environment, so the opposite of the Cyprus conditions. So this is our team for the island field campaign. You can recognize the ramp for takeoff, the ground stations, and conditions in Ireland were kind of harsh because the wind was very strong for this kind of drones. Temperature relatively cold, sorry. We were operating on an island, so you can imagine that any mishap ended up in the water. A storm completely destroyed our tent. We had a lot of technical difficulties, but that's also the way we learn faster. And something else that I want to mention is we always need to keep in mind that even if we are tired, cold, in a very difficult situation, it's always very important to be kind with our coworkers and to always be resilient on the field. So this is a video these are the tests in France before the Cyprus and Ireland campaign. So already in snow. Here you can see inside the drone where we put the instruments, where we make sure that everything is connected before the flight. And then the Cyprus field, you can recognize the tent with the ground station, and then the discussion between the two pilots before the flight, so the ground station and the RC pilot, to make sure that they understand the flight pattern. Here you have the GPS track of the drone during one flight. So takeoff is done with a ramp and a bungee. The bungee is going to pull the drones and give an initial velocity. And then the RC pilot turn up the motor after. So these are the videos from the onboard camera of the drone, so in the clouds. Very nice to see them. And then this is the belly landing at the end of the flight. Videos from Ireland. So our daily commute to reach our island. So you could see that sometimes it was kind of challenging to carry all the toolbox and the drones on our field site. So again, takeoff with the ramp and the bungee over the water. Ground station, one for the instrument, one for the flight. And then during this campaign, we flew very close to the ocean. The other things that was developed was a net landing. So you could see that the terrain there's nothing flat for belly landing. So having a net really helped to operate wherever we need, and also to protect the instruments in the nose of the drone. So these two campaigns were about clouds. And then the next project that I joined was in the Indian Ocean in La Réunion Island. So here you could see the Réunion Island and Madagascar and a cyclone. So the Indian Ocean is often hit by cyclones, and the models still struggle to represent the intensity and the trajectory of the cyclone. So that's why we need in-situ observations. But you can imagine that it's dangerous for a manned aircraft to fly, even like just in the perimeter of the cyclone. So that's why a drone is more adapted to this kind of mission. And but to sustain the higher wind speed in the perimeter of the cyclones, we need a bigger drone. So that's also a fixed wing unmanned aerial system, but you could see that it's bigger and heavier and can fly faster to sustain the cyclone wind. But the thing is, when you decide to use a bigger platform, you need more people, it costs more money, everything is more complicated. The instruments on board are also more complex. So it really depends on what kind of study, what kind of science you want to do, and you choose the platform adapted to the kind of measurements that you aim for. So this is a video for the project with the Boreal. So this is the payload tested before the flight. So preparation of the drone before the flight. You could see the payload tested, and then preparation of the engine, discussion between the pilots before the flight, preparation of the drone, and then the drone is ready to take off. So it's a catapult takeoff this time. The flight time is around 6 hours, so very far from the coastline, like could be 250 kilometers. And the flights, so yes, usually 6 hours, and yeah, these are like nice pictures of the drone at the takeoff. And then when we don't see it anymore, we need to look at the ground station. So that's where you have the GPS position of the drone. You could see how far the drone went compared to the island, and how many computers we need to look at the data, look at the other aircraft in the vicinity to make sure that there is no traffic. This is the onboard video of the Boreal. We have real-time video for this drone, mainly for safety, because the drone flew very close to the ocean, so we wanted to make sure that there were no boats. And it also helped for the science to see the cloud ceiling and to understand the wave directions. So that's the team after a hard day of work. So yeah, it's always very important to have a committed team and people that really get along together. There is something that you might have noticed in all the pictures that I have seen. It's just that, well, I'm the only girl in these teams. So I really encourage girls, if they want to study science and engineering, yes, it's possible to be a girl on the field. It's not easy. And sometimes there is no other girls, but that's why if it's what you want to do, yeah, don't get dissuaded. So the last field campaign that I'm going to introduce was in Barbados to study clouds for climate again. So Barbados is a Caribbean island, and you can see that it's the island and the most on the east part. So that's where our field site was during the experiment. The Raven, so developed by the University of Colorado, initially for storm chasing, but this is a beautiful and very flexible drone. So it was perfect to study clouds in Barbados. So you could recognize the RC pilot, the ground station pilot, and then local people came to see us. So it was very nice for the children to see the drone, and for them to discuss, to ask a lot of questions during the campaign. So this is my video for Takeoff. So here again, catapult takeoff for the Raven above the ocean, and then a belly landing on the beach just in front of us. Okay, and then what you expect to hear about the MOSAIC project. So you might already know that the MOSAIC project is a year-long project on board of the Polarstern, the German icebreaker stuck in the ice. On this figure, you could see the position of the Polarstern at the beginning of the week. So the boat is drifting with the ice. And then on board of the boat, I think there are around 40 crew members that ensure the logistics, take care of the ship. and then around 60 scientists who all worked to better understand the Arctic climate. So it could be taking care of instruments on board of the boat, or it could be instruments on the ice, which is the case for the drones operation, the MOSAIC, that are working from the ice. But it's just to say that drones measurements during MOSAIC, it's just one among thousands of other instruments and other measurements that are done during this campaign. And atmospheric science is just one field. There are a lot of measurements done for the sea ice, for the ocean science, for biology too. So it's let's say that all these measurements are very complementary, and drones is just one among all of them. So to resupply the ship, there are rotations every 3 months. So that's why I haven't been yet in the Arctic, and I'm supposed to join the Polarstern at the next rotation. But we already have 2 scientists from the University of Colorado on board of the ship, and we keep a very tight communication with them. So this is John and Gina's pictures, and I really invite you to read the adventures on their blog, and these pictures are from their blog. So you could see that they set up a tent to operate the Data Hawk. So the Data Hawk is also a small fixed wing drone with a takeoff with the Benji again. And during the flight, you could see the RC pilot making sure to get to keep the visual with the Data Hawk, and the screen for the ground station. You could see the GPS position of the plane, and we also monitor like parameters and instruments. But even if these are like sunny pictures, it has been a very rough weather for them. A lot of storms that prevented them to fly. There are a lot of cracks and leads opening around the boat that don't help to, for example, to get the power in the tent to operate. That sometimes the instruments need to be relocated. Sometimes the ship drifts so far that there might be some safety issues, so we need to relocate everything for the flight. So there are all these challenges associated with the Arctic conditions that Gina and John are currently experiencing. So yeah, it's not easy at all to operate drones in the Arctic. Before answering your questions, I would like to ask your participation, because people that are currently on board of the Polarstern arrived on February 28th. And because of the current situation with the virus, they might not come back before June. So it's a very long time. It's hard for some of them. And so that's why I would like to ask you to send them messages to tell them what you think about the amazing work that they do. Either they are part of the crew members for the logistic, or either they're scientists working on the Arctic climate. And we'll make sure that they get your messages. So thank you.
All right, awesome, Radiance. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and welcome back from the Screenshare. Pretty darn impressive. I mean, your work has taken you all around the world. It's pretty cool. All right, excellent. So for those who are tuning in via YouTube, don't forget that you can send in some questions for us, and we'll make sure that we share some of them. So let's get started right away with the teamwork aspect. So it looks like it takes a lot of teamwork. How big are the teams usually when you're out in the field?
To operate the small fixed wing drone, it requires only 2 people, the RC pilot and the ground station pilot. But from the field campaign that I show, it's usually like a month field campaign. And there are a lot of logistics that are involved in. So for small fixed wing, it has been minimum 4 at the beginning at least, and then 2 after. And then for the bigger fixed wing, like the Boreal for Cyclone, it was minimum 9 people. But as you saw in the Arctic for the Data Hawk, which is a small fixed wing, only two people are enough. But that required them to be very polyvalent, to know enough about the engineering side, the technical side of the drones, because they had to assemble the Data Hawk before the flights. A lot of troubleshooting with the Autopilot, with the motor, for example. And then they also need to be scientists to understand the measurements that they do. So when they look at the temperature profile, they need to be able to recognize that, oh, okay, this is this kind of a picture for the Arctic, and this day was different. So it requires people that are, very flexible.
All right. Okay, so your education took you all around the world. Was that intentional, that you chose to go to different locations for education, or was that more of this is where the program I want is?
It was intentional. I wanted to live in Asia. So that's the funny part of the story, is that I wanted to live in Asia. So I picked up the longest exchange program between my school and a university in Asia. But I didn't know anything about the country, and particularly I didn't know anything about the program. And it was a research master. And the research in South Korea is very close to the US system, but it's very different from the French engineering system. So I didn't know that I signed up for research at all. So I learned everything in South Korea with the barrier language. So it's funny how I learned about the US research system in another country. But the French system is very different. But I would say that choosing to study abroad, to live abroad, is not easy, because there is a lot of cultural challenges, barrier language that we need to deal with. But it's also a way to learn faster, to be very quickly independent, because there is nobody that you can rely on. And it's also a way to recognize our own, even if we think that we are open-minded, there is always like cultural behavior that we keep. And it's when we go abroad that we realize that, oh, okay, my mistake, my bad. I misunderstand you because of my cultural background. So it's a very humbling situation to live abroad. I don't hear you.
Oh, that was on my end. I just assumed I was unmuted. I had a feeling this question would come up, and it's about losing the drones. How often do you lose the drones, or do they come back pretty regularly?
I think we recovered all the drones mainly. Yeah, we did. That's the primary choice that we make, to choose foam drones instead of fiberglass, for example, is the resilience. So for example, you could have a crash, a takeoff that happened particularly at the beginning of the campaigns, and then glue together again the fuselage, check the instruments, and then 2 hours later, you can fly again the same drone. So usually we experienced mishaps at the beginning of the campaign. So in Ireland, we had at least 2 drones going into the water that we recovered. And then we repaired them and they flew during the campaign after. And then once you gain enough experience, so for example, for the Barbados campaign, there were no mishaps, no drone in the water, because this platform had like enough flight time. The pilots were experienced, so it becomes easier.
All right, very cool. So Aldo was wondering, have you, since you've been doing this, studying the atmosphere, is there anything you've learned from the drones that has kind of changed your understanding? Anything that stands out that's changed your understanding of the atmosphere?
Yes. I'm going to take the example of the clouds, because that's the system that I know better. It's okay. So for example, before we were studying clouds with manned aircraft, but the airspeed, the velocity of the manned aircraft is very fast. So in the clouds, you could have like only 2 or 3 data points, compared to with a drone where the velocity is slower. So instead of 2 data points, it's going to be 15 in one cloud. So with drones, we already get far more information on the cloud that we want to. And we published 2 papers about it was about the clouds. There are like models that represent the dynamics inside the clouds. And with in situ observation with the drones, we realized that, there were some parameters like what we call entrainment. So the like wind inside the clouds that were not taken into account with the models. So comparing the drones observations and the model, we've saw that there are processes that we thought that were nothing before that are actually very important for the dynamic of the clouds.
Okay. All right. Great question. Let's grab another one here. This one is from Kamal. And so she is joining India, and she usually has her group, her SDG warriors, who tune into a lot of these events. So a big shout out to them joining us in India. And she would like to know, how long was your longest drone flight, and does it take a lot of patience?
It takes a lot of concentration to be at the ground station, make sure that we regularly check the parameters, because sometimes it could become boring when there's no problems, but sometimes something could happen like that. So we need to make sure that we are very concentrated on the ground station. So yes, it required patience. The longest flight with a small fixed wing drone was 2 hours and 15 minutes with the Raven in Barbados. And it was 6 hours with the Boreal for the cyclone study in the Indian Ocean.
So Radiance, just to make sure I'm understanding okay, and everybody else is as well, it's the takeoff and landing is kind of where there's a pilot in full control. But then once it kind of gets up to where you want it, then is it kind of like a program pattern that it follows?
Yes. For each of these platforms, there is an autopilot on board. So before the flight, we define a flight pattern. So for example, if we want to measure the temperature, we are going to select a spiral up and spiral down that are going to provide a profile of the atmosphere. And then we select the distance and the pattern that we want to fly. So after takeoff, when we just make sure that everything is working well at first, and then we switch to the autopilot that are going to take care of the automatic part of the flight.
All right, very cool. So let's circle back to that Indian Ocean expedition with the Cyclones. How close, I mean, the drones definitely looked like they were more heavy duty, like they were tougher. How close could they actually get to a cyclone? Were they actually going into it, or were they kind of taking measurements around? How close were those drones getting?
So this drone is not designed to fly into the cyclone. There are other projects with drones from US that use drones to go into the cyclone, but for this project, that wasn't the case. The drone can get as close as the center of the cyclone, depending on the wind. So maximum wind would be 120 kilometer per hour. Sorry, I'm speaking about kilometers because that's what we use. So it really depends on the wind conditions. It could be, it's still far away from the center of the cyclone. It also depends on the intensity of the cyclones, but it could sustain like 120 kilometer per hour wind, which is already a lot for a cyclone.
All right. So I like this question. This viewer noticed that you mentioned women in STEM. So they're wondering if there's somebody who inspires you to achieve what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing.
Yes. I think when I was a little girl, I met a woman who was part of the CNRS. So the CNRS is the main research group in France. And she was working in space weather. So everything related to the magnetic field of the Earth. And she was traveling all around the world. She had program in Vietnam, in Africa. And when I discussed with her, I realized that being in the science, it's different from the woman-man situation, but what I realized was that being in the science was a way to share knowledge. And that's what I like about research is that we share the data, we share what we understand, and it's not a competition that could be, for example, for businesses. For the drones, there's a large community, an international community, and we share where we put temperature sensor to make good measurements. So that's how I realized that development of not only people, but also society and country could also come from science. And yes, it was a woman who told me that.
All right, very cool. So a great question here from our group in India is they're really interested to how they can share these messages, these letters, these pictures with Team MOSAIC. So you and I, Radiance, were talking about this before the call. So Kamal, if you want to collect some of those and send them to me, you have my email, and then I can pass them on to Radiance and she can make sure they get where they need to go. And as well, I'm going to reach out to all the classrooms who have taken part in past MOSAIC events and have those students do the same thing, make some pictures, make some letters, and we'll collect them and we'll make sure that they get out to the team on MOSAIC because their leg is lasting quite a bit longer than I think they expected that it would.
Yeah, that would be so nice if you could write messages for them. In the project, we are currently doing sending them messages and doing videos for them to cheer them up. But receiving something from you, from a broader audience, I think that would be even like a stronger message for them.
All right, very cool. So Radiance, we're gonna hit you with one more question. And this question is about turbulence. How does it affect the drones? How do you kind of take that into account?
We measure turbulence. That's one of the parameters that we want to get from the drones. The The autopilot is designed to correct the position of the drone based on the wind and the turbulence encountered during the flight. Of course, you have already identified that depending on the platform, the wind and the turbulence could be like too strong for small fixed wing. So depending on the conditions we fly, we also need to know the limits of the platforms. Turbulence, it's mainly strong wind that are going to be a problem compared to turbulence, because turbulence could be recovered by the autopilot.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to thank the group that tuned in via YouTube today and those who will catch the event later. Thanks for learning in this difficult time and taking some interest in the MOSAIC Arctic event and the amazing work that they're doing to help us understand our planet better. Because now more than ever, it's important to understand the changes that are happening with our climate. And then Radiance, a huge thank you to you. Thank you for sharing your work with us. I mean, just amazing, the places your work has taken you, and I'm sure it'll inspire others to think about a similar line of work. And yeah, thanks so much for what you've been doing. I hope everything works out and you're able to successfully take part in your leg of the expedition and fly some UAVs over Arctic sea ice, because that would be probably pretty darn cool.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to going in the Arctic and fly the data. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much for watching the video, asking the amazing questions. It's a real pleasure to interact with you. And also it's a way for me to learn what is your interest, what are the questions that you are wondering. But yeah, thank you very much.
All right. Once again, thanks everyone for joining in, and we're going to sign off for today. See you, everyone.